This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening and welcome to the Friday Late Show with Sean Mackay. Tonight I'm going to be talking to literacy guru Alice Visser-Furay, and she's going to be talking to me about small focused literacy interventions. So get your pens ready, I've certainly got mine, and let's do this.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and good evening and welcome to another Late Show with me, Sean Mackay. We haven't got Alice at the minute. We're just waiting for her to log on. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I normally do, which is to start off with the book that I'm reading at the minute. And the book I'm reading is called Toby and the Wizards of Wildhaven, which is an absolutely brilliant book. Only read a couple of pages, so I'm not really into it at the minute, but if there's anything, the first one's anything to go by, I'm looking forward to putting it into our library. So hopefully Alice will be here soon, and we will continue with it with this small focused literacy interventions. And Alice, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. It's fantastic to have you. Welcome back.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back.
So, are you finished in Oxford for the year, or yeah?
No, we still have another, let's see now, we've got 9 more days.
Oh.
So still a ways to go. And this week has absolutely been insane. It's one of those where you have the induction day with all year sixes and the planning for that. I had the Carnegie celebration for 65 students. We had a double word millionaire celebration, setting up spreadsheets for next year, doing lots and lots of testing this week to see how much progress students have made. We're launching a new program called a Sparks Reader, so I'm getting that all set up. So it has been one of those weeks where you think, wow. Yeah. So, but are you finished where you are?
Yes, we finished yesterday.
Brilliant.
Again, we had those kind of insane things going on over the last couple of weeks with the year sixes coming up, doing all the thing. But we're also setting up Sparks Reader as well, because we've got the maths are doing it, so we get a free year with it. So we're going to have see what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing the same.
So let's get straight on with it then. So now, obviously, there's always going to be children in school that need kind of these really small, focused literacy interventions because either their vocabulary isn't up to scratch, or their decoding isn't good enough, or the fluency, or whatever it is. There's always going to be students that need these kind of really small focus groups so that we can get them back to where they should be. So in terms of me, now obviously the thing that I would normally do is have a look at the tests that we do at the beginning of the year to see which ones I would do, and they normally are comprehension tests. How would you start by to find those kids that need those literacy interventions?
Right. So you're right. Initially, the screening has to be done, and we use a variety of different sorts of types of data. Those include for our new year sevens, that will be the Key Stage 2 SATs data, of course, but also we use the STAR test, and that's done for everybody. Other schools use NGRT. There's a whole range of different mechanisms that you can use for screening. So we look at then the whole cohort, and I think it's important to look at more than one piece of data. We also get soft information, if you will, from the primary school teachers. So they come up to the to King Alfred's, where I teach, and they give feedback on the students that they're concerned about, and it is tailored to that individual child. And they can give us information that so and so struggles with decoding, and they struggle with this aspect of decoding.
Yeah.
So they can give us that kind of information. What we try to do is, within the first couple of weeks, build a whole picture of the child, and once we've screened to see where there are students with clear reading issues, we need to then dig down what precisely is the issue and then put the correct intervention in place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have. I don't know whether you're the person that talks to the primary school, but we have at our school, we have specific people that are constantly talking and asking questions at the primary school. Our primary liaison for our secondary school, but that's really quite interesting to talk to the primary school about literally getting literacy information about this person struggles with decoding, this person struggles with doesn't have a wide vocabulary, this person doesn't read very much.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something.
So we have a form that we ask them to complete. So they all come, and we have a primary liaison colleague as well. She has this form that we've put together, and it specifically asks for reading barriers, and that can include a whole range of different things, exactly as you said. And it's really good because you get individual things. So, so and so really loves football and football books, and that already gives us a way in. So those sorts of things, as well as the specific sorts of barriers that they have. So and so has dyslexia, or an EAL student that still struggles with decoding words in English, as well as the vocabulary, etc.
So it's not just the technical data that you're getting from them, it's the little nuanced pieces of information that's going to really help you to understand A, how to break down those barriers, but B, also to know what that child does and does not like, so that can help you as kind of the literacy lead to make sure that your interventions are even more kind of tailored, because you know the sorts of books that they may like, or the types of topic they may like. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. And, that's the basic information that we use, the screening, and then that helps us to go for the next step, which of course is the diagnostic. And that information that the primary school teachers give us is helpful for the diagnostic, but we do our own things as well. In our case, because I know how to identify what the sorts of barriers are, I listen to the students read. It doesn't take very long, just a couple of minutes, and I can very quickly identify the sorts of barriers that they've got. But the primary school information is also useful as a way into talking to students. So before I meet with a student, I'll look at the primary school data, and I'll ask the student themselves. So as part of diagnostic, yes, of course we use data, but also just talk to the students and say, how do you find reading? Have you always found it difficult? And what sorts of things have been put in place to support you in primary school? What do you think worked for you? What kind of support do you feel like you have at home? Is there anything we can do? So asking and talking to the students as part of that whole diagnostic process, I think is important, as well as, of course, we sometimes will do, or I'll have them read aloud a passage. Sometimes I will check for fluency. I can do that intuitively fairly quickly, but a lot of schools will use dibbles, or some people call it dibbles, which is free reading fluency stuff as far as the diagnostics are concerned. So what I'm saying here is basically you've got the screening, and then you're looking at the whole cohort. Then you have the diagnostic, and you're using a little bit more detailed information, and that can be through things like the YARC reading test. It can be through reading fluency tests, DIBELS, or others. It can be sort of, if you have somebody that knows how to identify what the barriers are, it can be through those, and they are short and sharp meetings, so it is 5 to 10 minutes with each student. And there you can go through, we're a big cohort. Next year we're going to have 360 students, so there's quite a lot that we'll need to look at. Yeah, it is a very big cohort, so there's quite a lot to get your head around initially, but it's important to get those things in place so you can identify where the need is and how the students feel about that, and ideally over time communication with home as well.
Yeah. How, with the students that you actually identify as those ones that need that kind of literacy intervention, do you work with the parents from day one to make sure that they are as involved as they can be in terms of ensuring that not only are they doing kind of the reading at school, which is where they've got that expertise, but also kind of at home?
So that is something I'm striving towards. I would say that we are not from day one. Basically, because of the size of the cohort, there's lots and lots of individual students to meet, etc. I have been working hard to improve parent communication, and we are sending information home to students about students, for example, who have declined in their reading scores since they came to King Alfred's.
Yeah.
We are putting in place for next school year some parent forums, if you will, something like that, where we are talking to parents about groups of parents, small groups, a little bit like of a coach type thing, where
Mm.
they're invited in maybe for some cake or some snacks, etc., and talking about reading. So we're putting those things in place. I do try to phone as well
Yeah.
early on. Usually it ends up being before Christmas rather than right away.
Right.
Phone to let them know we've put this reading partner intervention in place, which I'll talk about later, I'm sure. We put
Yeah.
this fluency group intervention in place. Here's what you can do to support at home. And I have every year a letter that I send home
Mhm.
with various ways that parents can support their children
Right.
and help them develop.
Wow, it's great. So there's lots of stuff going on then when you first get those children in, to try to find out everything that you possibly can in order to understand all the aspects of the child. And it seems you do an incredible amount of work to try to get these interventions in place. So obviously you are going to need everyone kind of that's part of that process, from the head, the person, the what's it called, lead, in the primary school liaison, all of those people. How hard is it to kind of just coordinate and all of those different strands to get those initial first bits in?
It's really difficult. I'm just going to be honest. It is a challenge to get.
Yeah.
It's not everybody wants to put in place, and I have institutional support, if you
Yeah.
will. It's just that schools are very busy places. So my SEND, the Senko colleague, we try to meet and discuss individual students as well as overall approaches. And we do meet, but really what it should be is sort of a weekly type meeting where we're talking about particular students. It's just that we're so busy with trying to get everything set up that we don't meet as often as we should. So we've got the institutional, in theory, the support in place, but the actual practice and day to day, it's hard to make the time and etc. So another example would be the TAs, who
Yeah.
can provide quite a lot of small group or individual support. And we have put in place training for our TAs, but they are so busy going back and forth, being there with the EHCP students,
Yeah.
that they don't necessarily have the time to pull them into small groups. And that is a diminished amount of capacity that we would have, because they're so busy with particular students they need to be in the classroom for. It reduces their potential for doing these interventions, even when we know that this particular group needs a fluency intervention and I can train this TA to deliver that. It's just, when are they able to do that? So getting everything set up logistically and making it work in a busy school is a challenge.
Great, that's brilliant. So now we've got all that first or initial thing. Well, when we come back after these messages, we'll be talking about the first steps on that process. So we'll be back in a second.
Okay.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org. Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Watch sessions by thought leaders in education, literacy experts, and EdTech specialists from the International Reading Conference for free. The lineup included renowned speakers such as TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui and beloved children's author Michael Rosen. The three-day conference explored a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Sign up to receive the recordings for free by visiting the Reading Solutions UK website at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out! Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading!
And welcome back to the Late Late Show with Sean Mackay, talking to Alice Visser-Furay tonight about literacy interventions. So, Alice, we've talked about everything that you do in order to start off with to figure out about the children that need the intervention. So, what's the next?
Could I just add one thing? Because based on the first advert that I heard, linking into the tech, etc., I was thinking about another thing that we are going to be trialing in teams. There's something called Reading Coach, and what you could do as a cohort is have all students record themselves on Reading Coach. So in Teams, it's a free part of Teams, and it's called Reading Coach in Immersive Reader on Teams. And you give a short passage, and you have them record themselves reading aloud that passage. You then will get, for each student, individual data on their correct words per minute, the words that the accuracy rate, there's even a monotone score. So did they read with expression, etc. And that could give you some of the screening data. Now, up till now, we're using it more as an intervention for them, for students to practice. And I know we're about to talk about the various interventions, but it could also be used as a screening tool. You could maybe set that as an independent learning or homework, as we call independent learning, a homework for them to record themselves, and you get cohort data. You can also then get insights for an entire group to see where they're at, etc. So that is just tech is changing the ways of intervention, and that is one possibility for the screening aspect.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's certainly one thing I'll have a look at. Obviously, with most teachers, I would expect to use Microsoft and Office and can have Teams anyway. So that's certainly something that anyone can kind of use. So what would be then? So the first thing, we've got all our data that we need. We've done all these relevant tests to make sure that we've got the students and we know which students we're going to have. So what's the next stage? What do we do after that in terms of intervention?
So you need to decide what the level of need is. So there will be some students who need one-to-one decoding and systematic phonics support, and those students would be your top priorities, the ones who are at perhaps reading ages of, if you want to use that kind of phrasing, of 6 or 7 that struggle to decode basic words. So those students may need one-to-one support. We then look at which students are able to decode but struggle with fluency, could we then create small groups for them?
Yeah.
And then it gets a little bit complicated. So you've got the decoding groups, you've got the fluency groups.
Yeah.
You may work your way up towards vocabulary groups, and there are different vocabulary interventions that could take place as well. So you've got these kind of small groups of students or individual students that you want to work with. And then
Yeah.
it's a puzzle. So you need to then try to figure out, these students have a full timetable. What exactly are you going to take them out of,
Yeah.
and who is going to run these interventions? So it
Yeah.
is quite a complex logistical challenge to, first of all, determine which students should have which type of intervention and how often. Right? So should it be 3 times a week, 20 minutes, etc.? Is it once per week for half an hour? Is it once per fortnight for half an hour? So all those sorts of decisions need to be made. And of course, then there's the staffing. Who runs these interventions, and how do we make sure that they are going to be able to do them and not be pulled away for something else?
Yeah.
Then you need to go through their timetable. And for example, I do pull students from classes to have these interventions because reading is an overriding need.
Yes.
Teachers understand that, so that's not an issue, but I won't pull students generally. I'll never pull them from PE because that
Right.
generally backfires. I won't pull them from maths either, because if they fall behind in maths, that can lead to other sorts of issues. So
Yeah.
PE and maths never. And I tend to talk to the students, find out what they really, really like. So if they really love art, I'm not going to pull them from art, or same for tech or whatever the subject is, history. If they really enjoy that subject, I try to make the schedule so that they're not pulled from that particular lesson.
Yeah.
The idea behind interventions, of course, is that not that it goes on for a whole year. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be 6 to 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks of an intervention. And you look to see how they're doing at the beginning. And then at the end of that intervention, have they made progress? And if they have, do they need to still have that intervention? Or can they be put back into the mainstream classrooms without the intervention? So the ideal is to have them promoted out of these interventions.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen because of the level of need, but it is one of those things we work towards.
Right, so it's kind of, it does sound like there's an awful lot going on kind of in the background, because certainly understanding which, because obviously you must, when you're talking to these kids, as we talked about to begin with, when you're finding out all of the different aspects of that child to get the whole picture of them, you're finding out which subjects that they like and which subjects which they find difficult.
Yes.
So it's also incredibly hard, because the one thing that I struggle with is when I talk to the kids about which lessons, because I do a similar thing, and which lessons they like, which lessons do they struggle in. I'm always saying to myself, if they are struggling in this particular group, and I take them out of that group, out of that particular teaching lesson, am I making it even more of a struggle for them? So then, do I leave them in there? Do I take them out of that? And it's you have to. For me, it's kind of you have to. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. You have to make a compromise somewhere. At some point, you're just
Yes.
going to have to make a decision and say, we're gonna go with that one, no matter what happens. So once you got to that stage, then, and you found out the sort of intervention that you want to do, let's say we've got let's take the top of the shop, the ones that have the most amount of need, the decoding students.
Hmm.
Would you, with that intervention, kind of go the decoding group, and then they move up to the fluency group, and then they move up to the next group? So would those decoding ones have a longer intervention than the students that are maybe can decode and just need some bits in fluency or some bits in other aspects of it?
Absolutely. The students with decoding issues in secondary have really significant barriers.
Yeah.
So if they're struggling, and I have students that struggle to read single syllable words, if they're at that level, they are going to have intervention really for years because they are so far behind. And of course, a lot of stuff in primary schools has already been put in place. It's just their level of need is so significant that they will need to continue with interventions. So the ideal is that they are promoted from decoding into fluency
Yeah.
and from fluency into vocabulary. One of the ways, what I do with some of my students that struggle with decoding, in order to ensure that they access complex text, I've really promoted audiobooks. So I have a couple
Mm.
of students super, very, very severely dyslexic,
Yeah.
and they struggle with reading and have done, and we put intervention in place, and they've made significant improvements, but they still find it really difficult. Both of those boys that I work with on almost a daily basis, or other people work with them as well, they
Mhm.
are word millionaires because they listen to books. They love the Recruit series by Much More and other books as well, but in that one in particular.
Yeah.
And they'll listen to those books. We then read aloud the questions to them, and then what the benefit of that is that they're exposed to the complex texts and vocabulary and etc that
Yeah.
they can't decode themselves, but they can understand it. And normally, both those boys will get 100% on the tests if you read aloud the questions. And even if they read them themselves, it takes a while, but if they read them themselves, they'll get 100% because they understand the text. It's just the decoding itself is a
Yeah.
barrier for them. So that is one way. Yeah.
So let's go then straight to the. We've got everything ready, and we've got the student. If we're doing a decoding intervention, then how would we set that up? What sort of stuff would be in that decoding intervention, and what would you start with?
Yeah, so there's a whole range of resources out there, and it's going to be up to individual schools
Yeah.
to determine what works best for them. It is the systematic synthetic phonics, right? So, what you need to do for a decoding intervention is make sure they're confident with the phonemes, so the sounds of the language, and the graphemes, the letters that can represent those.
Yeah.
So, there are a number of different, I'll mention a variety of them that we have used, and that is sort of individual choice as long as it's systematic and they're working on that. Um, the important thing is to make sure they know those, and that students who struggle with decoding in secondary school will look at the first couple of letters of a word
Yeah.
and then guess at the entire word. And that's almost what they always do. They'll look at the first couple of letters, and you need to train them to actually decode the entire word. So
Yeah.
that's the part of what you need to do, regardless of what program you need to do. It's that practice of every single letter is important, right? So we
Yeah.
need to look at that carefully and training it again and again, because over years they've developed really bad habits of just randomly guessing based on the first couple of letters of the word. So some of the ones that we've used, Catch Up Your Code, which is a catch-up phonics program,
Yeah.
and that is got some YouTube videos and etc. about how to use it. It's very clearly set up, and it is looking at, for example, the sound ah and the different ways, the different graphemes or letters that
Yeah.
represent that sound ah. So that's one of them. The Fresh Start is quite a popular one. We use that as well for some groups, and that has a systematic approach to building up different sounds and the letters that represent those sounds, and then repeating that and etc. So it is a very detailed program that is straightforward to implement. We also like Piper decodables. They are decodable books, and what is really good about Piper decodables is that they also build cultural capital. So the texts in there aren't babyish. That's one of the things that secondary school students often say, no, I'm not going to read that. It's too babyish, right? So you need to make sure you've got texts that are a little bit more sophisticated, at least in themes.
Yeah.
So the Piper decodables have things like Beowulf in there, but then decodable, right? So they can read it and they build up sounds. They have good teacher instruction booklets as well to go with that. And then we also use Trugs. Trugs
Yeah.
is games, and those are sort of like an Uno game in particular. And what you're doing is you're working on particular patterns. So, the magic-y, however you want to call that. What happens when you put that E on the end, and you're working your way through different sets of cards that have that particular pattern. So they're practicing again and again. Because for decoding, the students that really struggle with it, they may need 70, 80 repetitions of a
Right.
particular pattern. So we've been working all year on would, could, should, right? I probably have at this point gone through that 70 times, and now they've got it, right? But it
Right.
just needs that number of repetitions for the students with really significant needs.
Yeah.
Others will pick it up much quicker. So it depends on the level of need there. But students who struggle, I just want to, in secondary school, when they still are struggling with decoding, there's a lot going on there because they also understand they understand that they can't do something that most of their classmates can,
Yeah.
and it affects them psychologically. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area as well.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly can absolutely say with certainty that lots of the kids that I've gone through and done literacy interventions don't like the babyish books. I used to, because we didn't have any. We only had kind of the younger decodable books. So what I used to do with my kids, so that they could have it, is they would have quite a big non-fiction book, and inside that book they had the younger kind of age book, so that they can read it, but it looked like they were reading a non-fiction book, and
Mhm.
that
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah.
so there's lots of stuff out there in terms of synthetic phonics. There's lots of software, there's lots of books, there's lots of programs. Obviously you've mentioned some of them, but and as you said, each school has to come up with their own understanding of what they need and kind of do their research for it. But obviously there is some that you mentioned previously. So we've got our decoding group, we've done our decoding, we've looked at the synthetic phonics, we've got our programs, and we're doing it, as you said, 60, 70 times, and we're getting there. And some of them have then passed that, and they've gained all of the stuff that they can get from that, and they go on to fluency. So what happens in the fluency part of it? What is different at that stage?
Okay, so fluency has a couple of different aspects, as I'm sure you know. It's the accuracy of reading,
Yeah.
it's the automaticity. Are they reading it without having to sound out the individual word? So you can read something accurately,
Yeah.
but you can do it without it being automatic, and it's very slow, and that affects comprehension, of course.
Hmm.
And then there's what's called prosody. Prosody is the expression that you read
Yeah.
with. So all those things are part of the larger picture of what fluency is.
Hmm.
So we need to work on all those areas, and there's a number of ways that we have done this. So what you're really looking at is giving students practice with reading aloud.
Yeah.
This tends to work quite well in a small group setting, so potentially 6 students, something like that. You
Yeah.
can select a text, and usually about a page or something, not too long. There's lots of various options for what sorts of text, but ideally something like a short story of a page. And you can then do practice with that. And the way that works is that you have the teacher read it aloud, and you read aloud section by section, and then you have the students practicing first as a group and then with each other as paired reading. And then the idea is, if they do that, then they'll be able to read that independently. They practice or perform
Yeah.
that section independently. And it is here again, it's practice
Yeah.
with reading things fluently and with being able to use expressions. So when the teacher models it the first time,
Hmm.
you can mark the text and you could say, here I'm making my voice go up, or here I'm saying a word louder to show that the character is irate. Those
Right.
sorts of things are something that they need to be taught. And there's a
Right.
lot of research, and Hearts for Learning has done some great work with this as far as the research into the impact on reading development. And they have seen in study after study that students who can read fluently, their comprehension actually improves, even without explicitly working on comprehension, because through that fluency, through that prosody, they're gaining the meaning of the story. So it is really quite interesting way to help students to improve. There are other ones. So, I mean, that would be a main one. And
Yeah.
there's lots of material out there on the internet about how to run those sorts of reading fluency practice sessions
Yeah.
in small groups. It can also be done on a whole class level.
Right.
And it could be, for example, in a history class, I teach history as well as English. In a history class, I could have a class, I could read aloud a source, and then I could have the students read aloud with me, and then I could have them read aloud to each other to give them a little bit more practice with reading aloud. Because in secondary school, there really is very little time for individual children to read aloud.
Yeah.
And they're expected to silent read, but they don't get much chance to read aloud. And that then those students who struggle with fluency suffer from lack of practice. Obviously, you want to feed back to home that it still is really useful to have
Yeah.
their children read aloud to them. So I always talk to parents about shared reading, which is then, you read some and you maybe read some together and then they read some. A light touch type thing. So not that they, getting into arguments, etc., but a light touch type thing, maybe 10 minutes, a few times a week, just a little bit of extra practice at home. Often when children go up to secondary school, or even really in Key Stage 2, parents think, okay, that's done then, the listening to children read aloud.
Yeah.
And it's not part of their daily practice, where it really does need to be for those students who struggle with fluency. So though, yeah, go on.
Sorry, it just made me laugh, because one of the things I always get at parents' evening is when you say, do they read at home? And they say, well, they used to. And it's kind of like, you think, well, why have you stopped? And one of the things that I say when they come for all the parents come and talk, and we have a talk to them, and then I say to them, one of the things that you have to remember is that we have lots of parents that complain that they never spend time with their parents anymore, with their kids. And I said, if you read with your child for 10 minutes a day, then that's 10 minutes that you get to spend on a one-to-one basis with your child, and you get to actually talk to them again, and you get to spend a lot of time with them instead of them going out with their mates or going up on their phone or in their bedroom. And that's one of the ways in which I try to persuade our parents that it's
Absolutely. And in my own, I've got 5 children, as you know, and
Yeah.
I read to my youngest until he's about 15. Really, it was I just kept reading, and it was lovely just that time. And I, savor that time. He's now 20, so I savored that time I had with him as an early teen.
Yeah, and certainly one of the things that you just said about kind of stop and tell them why you're saying it a certain way. I mean, I've done kind of fluency interventions, but to be fair, I have never thought about stopping and saying, I'm reading it like this because this is happening, and that's kind of something that it sounds really stupid, because surely I should be doing this. Surely I should be coaching them on how to do it. I mean, obviously we've done echo reading as class. We've done echo reading as a small intervention, but I've never stopped to say, at this point I'm raising my voice because this is what's happening, and I'm saying it in this way because of this. I think that's brilliant. It's simple but brilliant.
Yeah, I like your word coach there, because that's really what you're doing. It's you're coaching them to read in a particular way that improves their fluency. So I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. So, I mean, the echo reading and the model that I just described is one option.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other things that we've done as far as fluency interventions are concerned. So one of those is super scripts. So those are play scripts, and they are books where there's 6 parts. So it's ideal for a small group because there's 6 different parts.
Yep.
They are interesting topics, secondary school type things. So, it's space raiders, and there's one about champions, about skateboarding, etc., and warriors. And it is a really nice platform for students to practice reading and to each have a role. So we've used those to good extent, to good effect. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, actually, wouldn't it be interesting if we could do something similar that supports learning in various subjects? So as I mentioned, I teach history. We were working in year 8 on the Industrial Revolution. And I then went to ChatGPT, which of course is the AI, and there's other AI platforms as well, but ChatGPT is free. So I quite like that one. And I said to ChatGPT, create a play for students at a reading age of 8 with 6 characters, and make it about the Match Girls strike in London in 1888. And I gave those instructions, and it did a brilliant job of just, here's the narrator, here's Annie, here's Emily, etc. And then I could tweak it and say, no, I want this actual historical character. And the advantage of that is that it is overlearning. Basically, it's something that links into what they're learning in various subjects.
Yeah.
And then it's the fluency practice, and it's quite fun. They like things to do with the play, and they like that small group. Even students who find it really difficult, they are willing to do these small groups. And I'm
Yeah.
also struck by the fact that even students who find it really, really difficult will participate in these small group settings, and the other children are not mean to them, or they don't say anything negative to them, even if their reading is slightly better. So I'm always worried about, when I'm working with a struggling reader, if another student hears that and might make fun of them. But I've never seen it in all the years I've been doing it. So that is at least something that that hasn't happened, and I hope never will. The
Okay.
play scripts are a great way to go, and ChatGPT for subject-based topics to build fluency is a good way to go forward as well.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll come back after this.
This is your Teachers Talk Radio News for the week ending the 6th of July. Times Education Supplement reports that 6 of the 11 specialist maths schools have been delayed, prompting head teachers to wonder whether the millions spent so far might have been better spent with existing sixth forms. The Specialist Maths Schools program began in 2019. Each specialist maths school was set up by a multi-academy trust and linked to a university, and were designed to increase the number of graduates studying maths and science subjects. However, the date at which these schools are due to open has increasingly slipped into the future, as problems with finding sites and completing planning have led to increasing delays. A new Labour government has indicated that they will replace the single-word Ofsted judgments with a report card system, and have outlined 9 principles on which these report cards will be based. The 9 include a new emphasis on special educational needs, a flexible approach which takes into account the special circumstances of individual schools, and collaboration in school improvement between groups of schools. A time frame for the new system has yet to be announced. The new Children's Laureate, Frank Cotterell Boyce, begins his 2-year tenure in the role. He stated that during this period, he wants to demonstrate that making children's lives better by increasing their access to books and reading, which he calls the apparatus of happiness, is critical to the prospects of generations to come. And he's adamant that the research backs him up. There's nothing speculative about this, he said. We've got the figures, and we've had them for 25 years, and what a difference reading for pleasure and reading together makes for the life chances of children. Research by the organisation Teacher Tab have shown some worrying trends in the relationship between parents and schools. While 85% of primary school teachers indicated that they had a positive relationship with parents and home, only 46% of secondary school teachers said they had the same. And a quarter of secondary school teachers and 30% of primary school teachers indicated they've ignored pupil misbehaviour out of fear of a kickback on social media. And 1 in 5 teachers have experienced abusive emails or messages from parents. And 1 in 5 teachers have also indicated that they've been subject to verbal abuse from parents. And 2/3 of primary teachers say they've never had any training on managing parental relationships. With the Labour Party's commitment to extend voting to 16-year-olds and above, the publication Children and Young People Now have called for stronger political education to be offered in schools. Since, while votes for 16-year-olds remains widely popular among that age group, they also are the least likely to vote. Looking back on the last 14 years of Conservative government rule, the investigative journalist Warwick Mansell, in his online newspaper Education Uncovered, compiled a list of the 10 most egregious scandals in education over the last 14 years. These included such things as the lack of transparency in funding of multi-academy trusts, the payment of executives, and of course, the disastrous handling of the pandemic and qualifications. But above all, of the 10 scandals, the number one scandal was evidence that Ofsted had made up research findings in order to support its political agenda. In one case, Professor Mark Boylan of Sheffield Hallam University told Schools Week that he was astonished to find Ofsted citing research that he'd never carried out. And Professor Mike Askew, former president of the Mathematical Association, accused Ofsted of a complete fabrication in relation to the work he'd carried out with fellow academics, which was cited in an Ofsted report. This week, the BBC reported that a giant blanket made by parents of pupils who've been excluded from primary and secondary schools has been officially unveiled. The crocheted blanket was made from 2,999 pieces of fabric, which represents the number of children who were excluded on average each school day in 2021 to 22. Dr. Sarah Martin Denham from the University of Sunderland, who led the project, said it had brought the community together in a way that is wholesome and empathetic. The blanket will now go on a year-long tour of schools and community groups in England to raise awareness of this issue. And finally, Professor Lee Elliott Major, Britain's first Professor of Social Mobility, has tweeted that should Keir Starmer become Prime Minister, he will be the first Prime Minister since the Second World War who didn't obtain his first degree from Oxford University. Starmer went to Leeds University and is the son of a toolmaker. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News, read by John Gibbs.
Hello and welcome back to Teachers Talk Radio with Alice Visser-Furay talking about literacy intervention. So, Alice, we were going through fluency and we've done decoding, and what other interventions would we have, but also how do we motivate them once they're in there to kind of keep learning, to keep doing the stuff that we want them to do?
Okay, so the third area that you might think about interventions is in and around comprehension and vocabulary. Now, some would argue, and I actually probably agree, that for students who struggle with comprehension, a major barrier for them is they don't have the background knowledge that they need to be able to access the text, and that means that they don't understand what they read. They will also so basically it's a problem pulling them out of subject lessons because they're missing out on the exact thing that they need to be able to improve their comprehension. That said, there are comprehension strategies that you can teach them. So pre-reading strategies, so these metacognitive type strategies. So pre-reading, before you read, what can you do? You need to activate what's in your brain already. You need to look at the chapter headings, maybe the illustrations or the graphs, and etc. Try to think about what it might be about. During reading strategies, it is while you read, you're asking questions, you are rereading if you find it a bit tricky. Some students are surprised that actually fluent readers, adult readers that are fluent, will go back and reread several times. They think if you don't get it the first time, then you're not going to get it. So those sorts of things, making predictions while you read. And then, of course, after reading strategies, being able to summarize and pull together main ideas. So some practice with that in sort of a short, sharp intervention is quite useful for students. And so that would be comprehension. Another one that you could talk about is vocabulary interventions. Some schools,
Yeah.
for example, use Bedrock, and there's other sorts of Oxford University Press has various vocabulary programs as well. And those can be effective for teaching the Tier 2 vocabulary that is across
Hmm.
the curriculum. I think it's especially useful if you're looking at that vocabulary and applying it to different subjects and topics that they're learning. So those are sorts of interventions that you might do. And then that area that you mentioned about the motivation, and I think that is really important. And that's really across the board for the decoding, the fluency, the comprehension, the vocabulary interventions that you do. You really want them to change their attitude towards reading, because so
Yeah.
often students who find reading difficult don't read because it's not enjoyable for them, and
Yeah.
therefore they don't get better at it, and it becomes this negative spiral. And what you want to do is to break that cycle and give them a positive interaction with reading. So Teresa Kremen says the will leads to the skill, and
Yeah.
she's Open University and Reading for Pleasure, etc. And I really believe that they need to want to get better at reading. And so there are different ways to do this. These students will need that are demotivated and don't enjoy reading. They're going to need more interaction with adults, more positive reinforcement, more praise.
Yeah.
Brilliant! You've shown the skills of an excellent reader there because you asked a question while you were reading, etc. Those sorts of things. I think another
Yeah.
aspect of that is feeding into their particular interest. And towards the beginning of the show, I talked about the finding out what they like. So, if they're into rugby, for example, then make sure that you find a book on rugby.
Yeah.
Right now, we are going to have teaching some of the reading lessons next year. We're going to have actually a couple of PE teachers. And I asked the PE teachers what kinds of sports are their particular sports. So I've just yesterday ordered for the teachers then, so that they can talk about books they've loved and hopefully link to some of the students who are a little bit more reluctant. I've ordered books on rugby, on swimming, and dance. Those happen to be the 3 areas of interest of the teachers that are doing that. So finding something they interest. And one thing that's new for us this year that has worked really, really well is the
Yeah.
You Choose books. So these are interactive adventures. So it's You Choose. So if you choose to go to the cave or the river, and you go to different pages depending on
Right.
what you
Ah.
choose. And it's like a gaming, right? And there's lots of these available. So there's Special Forces, and there's the Titanic, and Can You Survive the Jurassic Period, and Exploring Mars, and World War One, Race to the Moon. There's loads of different ones, and they're all. There's a zombie one. They love the zombie one, and
Mhm.
they're all like that, where you make a choice, and if it doesn't go quite right, you end up dead, and you then
Yeah.
start all over again. And they quite like that because it's exactly what would happen in a game, and it's motivating for them. So what you're giving them is a positive experience of reading, something they enjoy, and we often use these with our reading partners. And I haven't really talked about that yet. The Reading Partners is a one-on-one intervention that we do with 12 volunteers who come
Yeah.
in. They're trained. They then provide this one-on-one support for the students who struggle with reading. That enables us to give students more reading time to develop their fluency. And often they'll use books like this because it brings up conversations as well. They'll pull out the atlas, and they'll look at
Yeah.
where is the country that, Brazil, that's mentioned in one of these books. And they'll look at that, and they're discussing in and around that, as well as going through the adventure together. And you hear lots of laughter, lots of positive experiences of reading. And I think that is good for everyone involved.
So it kind of builds up the cultural capital as well as the reading in those one-to-one sessions.
Exactly.
What we'll talk about the last part of it after this.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org. Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Watch sessions by thought leaders in education, literacy experts, and EdTech specialists from the International Reading Conference for free. The lineup included renowned speakers such as TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui and beloved children's author Michael Rosen. The three-day conference explored a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Sign up to receive the recordings for free by visiting the Reading Solutions UK website at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out! Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading!
This is
And welcome back to the last part of the show. Tonight, talking to Alice Visser-Furay about literacy interventions. So finally, then we've done all our interventions. We've got the whole kind of class. We've done all of our data trawling and talking to the thing. We've decoded. We've done the fluency. We've done the comprehension of vocabulary. We've tried to make sure that they're motivated. How do we measure the impact of the stuff that we've done?
Yeah, so you need to then have data to show that what you're doing is effective, and progress monitoring is absolutely essential. So that can be the NGRT or the STAR test or whatever platform that you use to monitor. There are other programs as well that have their own mechanisms for measuring that involve you testing. So basically, what you would want to do is the same test that you did initially as part of the screening. You want to repeat that test to see, has there been progress? If not, why not? Is the intervention not tailored to them? On the day of the test, that later test, were they disengaged? Did something go on, etc.? Do they need to redo it? But yes, absolutely, you need to monitor the progress, and you need to then evaluate whether or not it has been successful, and if not, why not, and perhaps do a different sort of intervention or give that child another opportunity to show where they're at. There is also, it's important to look at sort of the soft data as well. Talk to the student. How do they feel about their reading? You can do, we often will do a survey at the beginning, and then that they do, and a survey at the end. It could also be data come from parents or from teachers, etc. But again, here, like we said at the beginning, you're trying to build a whole picture. And yes, the data is crucial for that. There is more than data. And you want to talk to the individuals. How do they feel? I just had today, the very last thing today, before I left school, a student said, it's just been so amazing. She feels so much better about her reading and had lacked confidence, etc. And she said, it just has now become my thing, and I know I can do it. So it's those sorts of things mean everything in a job like ours, when it is a lot of work and it can be frustrating at times, but you know that you can make a difference.
I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, I'll be fair, I've learned loads going into this tonight. I've literally written about 6 pages worth of notes by coming up, and it's the first time ever I'm going to download my own show just so that I can listen back to it and see if I've missed anything. But yeah, it's the one thing that I've found. Is there any? Do you do any? Ask any other departments to see whether or not that child is any better in terms of their confidence, in terms of whether or not they, I don't know, put their hand up to read, someone that never actually puts their hand up, and now after those intervention, is there anything like that people could do, just so that you can get different data, or whether that child can, whether the teachers see the difference because of that
Yeah, we
intervention?
sometimes do. So we will ask, in conjunction with the SEND department, you do a round robin, you ask for feedback. It can be also in conjunction with a parent meeting. I always have the phrase on there. We have sort of strategies to support struggling readers for the classroom teachers, and
Yeah.
use visuals, break down words, use sentence stems, provide support for various different types of reading, and build the background knowledge, etc. And the last one links into this: be professionally curious and
Yeah.
communicate with colleagues. So where they see they're struggling, communicate that.
Mhm.
Where they see they're more confident, communicate that too. So it is this open lines of communication with all stakeholders, really: child,
Mhm.
parent, SEND, subject teachers, reading intervention people, TAs. That then gives you a complete picture of where the child's at. And you do have some really inspiring stories of students who've managed to just turn it around completely. And that it is transformational for that individual child. So that makes it all worthwhile.
Okay, so just finally then, so do you also do either CPD or share what you're doing in terms of the intervention with the other staff members, just so that they understand the types of thing that you are doing, so that they can kind of look out for those things too?
Yes, so every year we do a CPD, which is about supporting struggling readers, and I explain what the situation is and how, as classroom teachers, they can support. Here's the specific strategies they can use. Here's how you can communicate. And yeah, so we do the CPD every year for staff as a top up, and
Yeah.
then also for new staff to make sure that they are on board with what we're doing.
Brilliant. So let's see if I've got this. So to summarize what we've been through today and what you've talked about, the first thing that you do is find out about the whole child. And this is through kind of screening, talking to the primary schools in terms of that soft data, talking to the students themselves before you decide what level of need they have, and deciding whether or not they're going to be going into a decoding intervention, a fluency, a kind of a comprehension of vocabulary, or whichever one it is. And then once you've done that, then you have to, obviously, the logistical nightmare kicks in, where you have to find out where you can take them from, what sort of teachers are going to do it, what sort of programs you're going to have. You've got to obviously look at the ones that you want to do. Once you've done that, then obviously the first ones we talked about were decoding, where they look at how confident they are. And you said about the fact that most kids that can't decode look at the first two letters and make a guess, which made me giggle at the time, because it's one of the things when you ask a student which for what was it, a terminology, and you say it begins with M, and then they shout out words like Mark and Michael, and so that kind of made me giggle when you said that. And then after you've done that, you go on. Then they move up into the fluency one, but also there are other people in fluency. And you talked about echo reading, but you also talked about stopping and telling them why you're saying things in a specific way, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. Really simple, but absolutely brilliant. And you talked about also doing it kind of whole class, but also getting parents maybe to do short little reading sessions with them at home. Then you talked about comprehension of vocabulary ones, where it's kind of like short, sharp interventions, but the vocabulary ones can also be linked to the other things that they're doing. Then we talked about motivation, I think, where we said make it enjoyable, and to talk to them about the different types of books, and the YouTube's books, which I can't remember what they were called when I was a kid, but I certainly remember reading those, because
Yeah,
they
choose
were
your own adventure, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, and they were brilliant. I remember reading them myself. And then there's also the reading partners, which is the one-to-one intervention, which also helps them all the readers into intervention, which is great, because adults coming from outside of school and they get helped. Make sure that you understand how they're making progress, and then kind of talk to the students, do the same test that they did, get feedback, do questionnaires, but also then keep talking to staff and keep topping up that CPD that they've got. I think I got everything there.
That was a brilliant summary. Wow, impressive. Yeah,
Well,
you brought it all
so-
together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the only thing for me to say now is, I feel, incredibly thankful that you've come on tonight and done this with still 9 days left. God, you've got more stamina than I have. Have you got anything planned once you finish over the summer holidays? You're just going to sit, relax, kind of go into bed?
I'm actually going to be in the UK for about 3 days total. So as soon on the Friday, I'm here in the UK. On Saturday, I'm going to the US for 2.5 weeks. I'm back for 2 days, and then I'm going to the Netherlands for a week, and straight from the Netherlands to Italy, and then we're straight back in. It's a 5-week break for us teachers, so we're straight back in the day after I get back from Italy. So. Yeah, it'll be a nice summer and lots of time for reading, which I'm looking forward to. So,
same here. Alice, thanks you ever so much for coming on the show again. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I'm hoping that at some point in the future we'll talk again. Thank you ever so much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, and that's it for tonight with the Late Date Show with Sean Mackay and Alice Visser-Furay talking some absolutely brilliant stuff on intervention. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you again soon. For those people that have started their summer holidays already, congratulations, and I hope you have an absolutely fabulous summer holidays. For those of you that haven't, like Alice, good luck, and I hope it doesn't take too long. Until next time, bye-bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.